Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy this channel, like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, blog post about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which inspires me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page where you can pick up my books. All right. So it has been a hot minute since I have done some fixing bad figure drawing. I've been doing plenty of bad figure drawing, but haven't been fixing them on the live stream. And hey, I see Omar in the chat. How you doing, Omar? Hey. So I've got a new setup in terms of my studio area. So I'm trying something a little bit different. And I've got my drawing board set up on the easel over here to the side, and I've got a camera pointing this way towards it. So let's go over there now and check this out. Let's see how this is going to work. All right, so let me get a light on, and hopefully this will show up a little bit brighter resolution. And I have to be careful here about not whacking the camera stand every time I move. And let's get the board into position for me so I can draw here. So, and I am using that newer camera that I purchased that has the ability to, I should probably leave these down. Well, no, I might need that. These up. It does have the ability to zoom in. So I'm going to try working a little bit zoomed out, then zoom in for a little bit, then zoom out. So I was also a little bit confused about where I should start today in terms of working on these, because all the drawings from my this week's drawing session, like all of them came out horribly. I've just had a week where I've been distracted, not able to spend as much time working as I'd like, as much time drawing. So I was like, do I want to even go back to the previous week? Because the previous week's worth of drawings, I still didn't spend as much time working on those as I'd like. But for me, the whole point of this exercise, as I've said many, many times, is simply the drawing when I'm working from the model is the first stage of me trying to develop and improve my understanding. What really changes things for me and helps me improve is going back and just looking at the drawings that didn't work out and saying, all right, why is this wrong? What's off here? Where can I adjust and improve this? So I guess we will start with this drawing over here. And hey, I see Chris is in the chat. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. Thanks for joining us. The one thing that bugs me about this new setup is that I feel like the lighting is not as bright as it was in my usual setup. I'm trying to find a good way to angle the board, the drawing board, so that more light is facing down this way. Or maybe I just need to have a light over my shoulder, because I just have one bright light instead of having, usually I have two lights coming at kind of a raking angle, sort of an angle that's set up for photographing artwork. Anyway, Chris, I'm working on redrawing some of my work from figure drawing class that was not as successful. And as always, I'm available to take questions on anything about drawing, about comics, about storytelling, creativity, what have you. So I'm just starting with lightly blocking in, and this is something I've been doing lately. I need to move this over because I just realized her hat brim is rather broad. I'm going to need to move this over so I have enough room for the hat brim. Like, let's say if the hat's here, her head's probably going to be over there. And that's a good lesson for you right there. The idea of using just a dot or a quick line to move things around compositionally before you start drawing the details. Just say, all right, how near or far does this thing need to be? So normally I would start blocking things in with an egg shape because that's the process that I learned from Carl Ganas, the instructor I've been studying with for many years. But I find that even though it makes my figures a little blockier, doing this box helps me with proportions. And you guys know how I feel about proportions. They are the bane of my existence. Everything I've ever done wrong in a drawing, I blame on bad proportions. Even if it is just me not paying attention or being lazy. So Chris asks, how do we come up with a story? And it's funny because my wife, when I was telling her I wasn't sure what I was going to do for this week's live stream, she said, well, why don't you do something on whatever your most popular YouTube video is? And oddly enough, my most popular videos are about writing. And I was kind of like, well, I'm not, the video that I've did that is popular about writing, that probably took about 2 weeks worth of planning. So, doing it on the fly during a live stream, particularly when I'm an artist, I may have to make sure I have something going visually while I'm doing it. But that is neither here nor there because that doesn't help you with your question. and of course, be showing polite courtesy. Chris also says, good afternoon, by the way. And good afternoon to you also, Chris. Thank you. I appreciate that. How do we come up with the story? Well, this is the interesting thing to me about writing. All of our difficulties about writing stem from us putting too much pressure on ourselves, myself included. I'm not exempt from that. I do it all the time. It's the reason why I haven't started putting out my next comic yet, because I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself in terms of the writing. But to say, let me take a step back. Your question was, how do we come up with a story? I would rephrase that as a question I've heard from a lot of people about how do we come up with ideas? Where do artists' ideas come from? And ideas are just thoughts. That's all they are. Now, I think the harder question, what you're really trying to get at, is how do we come up with a good story? Well, coming up with thoughts, I'm going to zoom the camera in. If the zoom will work. The zoom does not seem to want to work. All right, well, we're not zooming in then. Sorry about that. Oh, there you go. It zoomed out. Oh, there we go. So how do we come up with a good idea? Well, the same way that I work through, how do I get to a good drawing or a good figure drawing? I get to a good drawing by doing a bunch of bad drawings. So what you want to do is you want to start with just any idea. And the whole point is giving yourself the space and the freedom to have bad ideas, write bad ideas down, express bad ideas. And you just start with just a blank sheet of paper, but instead of having the blank sheet of paper, instead of it being intimidating, instead of it being like, oh, this thing is here, I don't know what to do, the cursor's blinking, instead just look at it as it's a space for your mind to just vomit. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've heard the expression of doing a vomit draft, but it's something that screenwriters talk about in terms of getting their first version of the story down, knowing that's imperfect. And the same thing can be done with just story in general. You can just sit down and write like one or two sentences of, a monkey gets launched into space and develops telekinetic powers. A woman finds out her parents are actually monsters from another dimension. A robot gains sentience only to find out that all the other robots are planning to destroy humanity, and he wants to save it. It doesn't matter what the idea is. You just start creating a list of ideas and writing them down. And the whole point is that you want to keep it a short, simple 1-2 sentence description. And you write down ideas that a lot of them are going to suck. And in fact, when you have an idea and you say that's stupid, the ones that are the stupid ideas are the ones you want to write down. Not because those stupid ideas are good ideas or will turn into good ideas, but you'll have an idea that's ridiculous, but it's so different from anything you've come up with before that that you'll say, all right, I don't like this idea, but there's something here. And then you're like, all right, the sentient robots. What about if the sentient robot is like the first sentient robot sent to Mars? Instead of him destroying humanity, what if he's the first alien contact that humanity has is not with humans, but with a machine created by humans? And it becomes kind of like the story AI, but it's the robot going to another planet. And then you start doing a whole bunch of things about space exploration and artificial intelligence. Not artificial intelligence, no scraping. But you start with one of those ideas that's going to have a kernel in it. And then what happens is, even with that little kernel, that little piece that's interesting, you maybe write 5 more. Like I would start with like a list of at least 10 ideas. And it doesn't matter. The whole point is that you have to get 10 ideas on the paper, not that any of the 10 have to be good. Now, out of those, you may get 1 or 2 that sound interesting enough that you'd like, I'd like to see what this is or develop it further. And then you do the same thing again with that, just those 2 ideas, as you create like another set of lists of 10 and just write variations on that story. And then you'll get to one that you're like, oh, okay, I think I might actually want to write this or draw this. So that's my approach in terms of how to come up with a story. So the most important thing is, when you're sitting down, is not trying to make it perfect at the start, accepting that those ideas are going to be bad, and knowing that you have to plow through a bunch of not good ideas to find something you want to do. So, Chris, let me know if that is helpful to you, and let me know if you have follow-up questions based on that. And I know James said hi a little while ago. Always good to see you, James. I'm glad it's working in Facebook this time. Thank you for letting me know after last week's little Facebook, I don't know, snafu, whatever that was. I don't know why it didn't work, but I just disconnected Facebook and then reconnected it. And I kind of want to zoom in even closer, because I feel like what I'm doing and what I'm seeing, you guys aren't really getting the benefit of. Like, I really want to figure out a way to set this camera up so it really is like you're right over my shoulder, almost like you're seeing what I'm seeing, which I guess would really help if I place the camera like directly here. But I was doing the camera setup at like 3 a.m. last night, and I was kind of loopy after a long night of drawing stuff that I was not happy about. And oh, hey, Paul is in the chat. Good to see you, Paul. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you recently had a birthday. Happy birthday, man. Yeah, so the camera placement was just not I think that I wasn't ready to sit there and really think through how I wanted this placed. I just wanted to, because I wasn't even sure if I was going to do this or pick up with what I was working on last week for this live stream. And in the end, I spent so much time working on my figure drawing, my personal figure drawing work, that I thought, well, that's what I'm struggling with. That's where I'm putting a lot of energy at the moment. So I figure that, I always like to show, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but I feel like showing the non-glamorous part of making art is the most important thing for other people to see. Like, I know for me, it's not like I want artists to be struggling and miserable, but when I see artists doing something and they're saying, it's okay, it is supposed to be this hard, that makes me feel better. It's not, because this is still my happy place. I enjoy making these marks on the page, analyzing the figure, and all the things that I do to try and improve as an artist. But just like everyone else, there's days when I'm just like, this isn't working, and it feels like it's never working. And if anything, it feels like I'm getting worse. And Paul says thanks, and also good to see you. Missed a couple of weeks. Yeah. I'm glad to be back. I was making a move, so I'm still working out things in my new studio, including, camera placement for drawing demos. And I really, really need to get my script locked down for my comics so that I can start drawing comic pages in front of you guys. Although the layouts I'll probably be doing. Not just the layouts. This was going to be the first comic I was planning to draw entirely digitally. So I was going to draw the whole thing in Procreate, just because when I was finishing up Morningstar, it was so easy doing my layouts digitally. And I kept saying to myself, if I just went from this to drawing my finished artwork, I wouldn't have to take the time to print out pages on Bristol board to work from, wouldn't have to mix up any ink. I could just go in, digitally ink my layouts, and then add grayscale, do any text revisions that I needed to do, and I'd be done. And I love traditional art. I love inking traditionally with a brush. But I wanted to see, and I still want to, I'm going to see what it's like to try that 100% digital workflow. And there's a podcaster I listen to, Sean Crystal. He talked about how years ago he was doing a project, and I can't remember which one he worked on. I can't remember whether it was a DC comic that he had worked on or a Marvel thing, but he was talking about how he tried going completely digital just to see, and in the end went back to inks. And I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen with me, but I just want to see what the experience is like. And there's something about, I don't want to just simply lock in my process and only do one thing, which they tell you that's stupid. You want to get known for doing a particular medium or a particular style. They say that that's how artists excuse me, hit the cough button. They say that's how artists build a career, is by doing these by finding one thing that they're known for. But at the same time, I feel like the way that I think a lot of artists tend to grow is by continually experimenting. And I think there is some truth in terms of picking a particular medium or a style or a process and continuing to refine it, so you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. But the idea of me, when I was in school, my major was painting. and I hardly ever paint anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that, doesn't have anything to do with making comics digitally, but it does have to do with the idea of continuing to evolve and refine the way that I create. If I just did what worked when I first started, I'd still be inking with a speedball nib and have a line that's slightly, more variable as opposed to the rich lines I get from inking with a brush. And what is interesting to me is just finding new ways to express my existing ideas. Let's see here. And James mentions, in terms of the conversation about coming up with ideas or coming up with a story, James says ideas don't necessarily have to make sense or be realistic. Not only do I agree with it, I double down on it. For me personally, I feel like ideas, the farther they are from our own experience in terms of the concept, the more it frees you up to explore big philosophical ideas. For me, fiction, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, what have you, fiction is an escape. It does not mean that it doesn't mean that you don't care about the world that we live in, but it's a release from the everyday experience that we have, from the everyday stresses. It's a chance to experience ideas and thoughts that we've never experienced. And I feel like the closer a story is to just an everyday lived experience, the less interested I am in it, because I already have a life where, I go to the grocery store, I do chores, I work, I don't come home, working from home now, but all of the boring day-to-day stuff that everyone does, I do that too. So that's not exciting to me. If someone is living an extraordinary life, a story about Neil Armstrong, like The First Man, which I haven't seen yet, but it's on my list. But even more than that, science fiction or fantasy is doing things that are so far removed from what I or other people have experienced that it's, it really kind of pushes the boundaries emotionally and conceptually. And that to me is that's engaging. So some people have the opposite. If it's too far from their removed experience, they can't relate to it. I think that's just a matter of how our brains are wired and what we're drawn to. And I see Suretzi in the chat. Great to see you, man. Thanks for stopping in. Glad you've been, continuing to put out work. I know there was a while back before I went on my move, I think I saw some of your posts on social that looked really, really nice. So good to see you. Thank you for dropping in. Let's see here. By the way, I know that I always wait usually until the end of the live stream to mention it. So I wanted to mention it while we're, kind of smack dab in the middle. The Patreon exclusive live streams that we do, the artist office hours, those are going to be tomorrow. So it'll be Monday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it'll be on a private YouTube feed that'll be posted on our Patreon Discord server. And during those sessions, if anyone wants to share artwork or get on the voice channel, so instead of talking in a chat, we can actually just talk, and discuss art and process and any of your questions. I'll be available for that while I'm still working through an existing art book. So originally it was called Art Book Study Group because I was breaking down Walt Reed's The Figure. And I'm still continuing to do that, but I felt like just changing it to office hours and making it more of a whatever questions you guys have and want to bring, we can talk about that. And if nobody has any questions, then I'll keep working from Walt Reed and talking about what I'm seeing, what I'm learning, what I'm trying to take away from that book. But if people do have, things that they want to talk about, then I want to be of service to those that are part of the community. So let's see here. So James says yes, an escape. What's interesting to me about sci-fi is that authors came up with technology that was realized in our world. Well, I for me, this is not something. This is purely opinion. It's not based in any studies or fact that I've looked up. But it's not as surprising to me, only in that science fiction as a medium created an idea of what the future could be. Now, no one knows exactly how those things would take shape or take form, but they feel like a self-fulfilling prophecy to me. The idea that once people have said, oh, we're going to have devices on our wrists with TVs in them, we're going to be able to, communicate with each other across vast distances. We're going to be able to prepare food and have it heated and ready to eat in like a minute. We're gonna build a spacecraft to colonize Mars. All these things, it's almost like even if it was fiction writers and not scientists that were laying out these ideas, humanity as a whole was like, well, we don't know where the species is going and what we're gonna do. These people are talking about these ideas of doing it. Let's follow those ideas. Let's see where that goes. So it feels to me very, very much like the fiction kind of, if that makes sense, the fiction laid out a roadmap, and it might not be the definitive roadmap. And there's lots of things in fiction that did not happen, thank God. And there's lots of things that, haven't happened that we wish we had happened. But the idea that somebody had to conjecture some of these ideas, like it took until SpaceX, it took us going to space and going to Mars. I mean, not going to Mars, but well, we did send the Curiosity rover to Mars, but it took us going to space and going to the moon and developing all these other types of rockets and vehicles before we now with SpaceX, now we have rockets that can fly, turn vertical, land, and then launch again vertical and then fly. That was something that was what we thought rockets would do in the beginning, and we just got that done now. There's lots of things that who knows how the things that are in fiction that will, hopefully to the benefit of humanity, will come up with and develop, in the near future. But yeah, the idea of a lot of these things being, almost prophesized in fiction, it just seems to me that we followed ideas that we had, and this is kind of the direction that humanity wanted anyway. And a lot of early science fiction was based on people studying what science was doing anyway. So some of it was people just making things up, but some of it was people saying, well, this is what scientists are working on now, in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Where might we be? So I don't know. That doesn't mean that you should not be amazed by that, because I think that any excuse that we have for wonder in this world is a beautiful thing, because I think that staying curious and amazed and fanciful is a positive thing. This hat should be going up a little bit higher. I've got the brim a little bit too low and it was turned up higher. That's another thing with figure drawings, is that it becomes challenging when you're trying to stay true to what you're seeing, but what would work better structurally is something that would require you to change what you see. So it's that question of, do I draw what's in front of me, or do I draw what makes a good picture? And I think the answer is always it's what makes a good picture. But that is it's a tough habit to break, trying to draw what we see. Let's see here. Suretzi says, I finally warmed up the graphics tablet, but I still will draw comics analog, but I will color more using the pen and tablet now. Yeah, that is the thing where digital really shines for me. Although I've been wanting to spend more time doing watercolors and getting back to acrylic paint. Like I was working on a painting for my wife that I'd spent a number of years on, and I finally finished last year. But it made me realize how much I miss traditional painting in color. But I do definitely take advantage of working digitally and doing color work because it allows me to do so many more variations. I mean, this all goes back to Chris's earlier question about working with ideas. Is I treat working with color, how I treat just basic composition the same way, where I'm like, let me just do a bunch of variations to whittle it down to the one that really feels like it works for me. Let's see here. As much as the faces that I worked on in class did not come out well, I feel like what I really need to work on is there were a bunch of hand drawings from the previous week that I didn't even get to. And I kind of want to go look at some of these hand drawings and work on that. Because that is where I was really struggling. Hand and feet drawing. Let's see here. All right, a couple of hands on here. This set of hands, just like one hand kind of holding another palm, and they're all just sort of mangled together. And I didn't even get a chance to really try and sort this drawing mess out, but I'm going to try and sort it out now. And I think I don't want to completely move this rig around while we're streaming, but I'm going to try, after this live stream is over, I'm going to try bringing my camera lower and kind of placing it right over my shoulder and see if I can get a setup that really gives you guys kind of a close, tight view of whatever I'm drawing, but it still gives me the freedom to move up, down, left, right. That's the real challenge, is that when I get that close, it's like we're at a pretty tight angle here. I don't know, maybe I want to put it over. Well, no, now I remember. I've tried putting the camera over my right shoulder and my hand blocks the drawing. So putting the camera to the left of me is useful in that if the camera is a little bit more closer to the screen and angled, turned towards it, then it can kind of look around my hand. Whereas if it's on this side, my hand will be blocking the actual drawing, which is not great. Does not make for a wonderful streaming experience. By the way, another drawing question. Or another drawing possibility that I came up with was I found some videos. There's lots of actual drawing reference videos on YouTube where it's just the model reference. And they have it with timed poses like you would in a figure drawing class. And what I thought I could do for a session is maybe take some of those timed videos and put the link to them in the chat. And during the stream, I could work from those timed videos, and you guys could draw from them as well. And we could maybe do that for half of the session, and the other half is like going through and analyzing the work, like I'm doing here with my work. So I don't know if that's something you guys would be interested in or not. Because I wouldn't put the video on the screen only because it's someone else's copyright or someone else. Well, it's someone else's video, so it's not my material. But if I just put a link to it in the description, and then I'm just drawing from it, I can just tell you this is I'd have it running like on my tablet to the side to work from. And you guys would be welcome to join along. Just something I thought about as I was doing some drawing last night. So if that sounds like something you guys would like to try in the future, let me know. Let's see here. I see Red in the chat. Hey, Red, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. How are you doing this weekend? You working on anything? Drawing, writing, comicking, illustrating? In fact, I'm curious how many of you guys are interested in comics versus illustration versus animation versus game development, because I feel like we have a pretty broad set of interests in terms of the group that's showing up and hanging out in the streams. I think the problem I have here with this drawing is just simply understanding how this palm is wrapping around this hand. I got to move this up a little bit so you can see. Or I'm going to get dangerous here. Bring the camera down slightly. All right. Excuse me. Let's see here. So, Red says, I'm doing great. I'm making a comic and the top is finished, but I think it says the below, but autocorrect is being a jerk. It says, but the below is just meh. I'm painting it, um, making it look more realistic. And Chris says, I'm interested in comics and illustration. You know, it's interesting because I'm kind of the same in that when I was in college, I was a painting major, drawing and painting, but I kind of realized, oh, I'm going to need to do something when I get out of school to make money. And I started studying animation. I used up the rest of my electives taking animation courses, and I really enjoyed it. But I think what I learned was that I enjoy storyboarding, but animation itself is probably not, I'm not necessarily well suited for, because it's very time consuming. I mean, kind of silly to say that it's time consuming when I talk about the fact that what I want to do is make comics, which is probably the second most time consuming process after animation. But I found that I enjoyed storyboarding, but the actual, timing out of animation and getting the natural movements just right. I definitely preferred storyboarding, where it was just a matter of getting a gesture for one frame, one or two frames right, versus, really making an entire movement flow and look fluid and believable is very, very challenging. But it's interesting also just in terms of like, like I said, we actually have a thread on the Patreon Discord server specifically for animation, because even though I'm not an animator anymore, a lot of the guys on there are animators and very much talk about it. So I thought, I should create a space for people on there who want to discuss this topic. And whenever I see something that's animation related that I think is interesting, I'll post that in there. Soretzi says, I'm interested in all of it. I'm interested in it all when it comes to art, but professionally, I'm only interested in cartooning and illustration in general. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. It took me a long time to try and whittle things down. And to a certain degree, I don't think I have really whittled it down, because the comics is not my bread and butter day job. It's what I would like to spend most of my time doing, but most of my energy actually goes towards toy design. And then whatever time I have left, I put towards a mix of just studying my craft, become a better artist like this, or comics or illustration. So I'm a little all over the place. And I do believe that narrowing up your focus is the best way to get stuff done. So I'm preaching, but I'm not practicing. Hopefully 2024 will be a year of being more focused. Red says, it is quite time consuming. It takes me 2 days to finish the top page of my comic. Well, I know you mentioned making stuff more realistic and painting. So are you doing digital painting? Is there a particular artist that you're influenced by, or a style that that you go after for your work? And I don't think there's anything wrong with having another artist as sort of your template, your North Star, that you're trying to do what they do, because in the end, it's going to get filtered through your own personal voice, and your work is going to still be yours, even if you're actively trying to do another artist's style. And I myself struggle with taking too long with pieces, but that's mostly because of my perfectionism. So, you know, I get caught up in trying to get everything just right. And when I talk about letting things go and not being hard on yourself, it is very much a do as I say, not as I do scenario. My allergies have been acting up. I'm going to have to mute for a minute and blow my nose. Just. All right. Whoa. Red says, yeah, digital painting is my inspiration. Digital painting. My inspiration is Alex Ross and Tracy J. Butler. Um, I am not familiar with Tracy J. Butler, but I'm going to check their work out. I'm going to write that down. But Alex Ross, I love me some Alex Ross. That's a pretty high bar. I can see why your work is taking you a while. Let's see. I'll write down Tracy Butler, Tracy J. Butler to look at later. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really high bar. It's an admirable high bar, but that's gonna be a lot of hard work. I mean, even Alex Ross himself has taken to occasionally changing up his workflow because of how long it takes him to paint comics. Like, he did that pen and ink comic, Fantastic Four Full Circle, and I thought it looked just as beautiful as anything I've ever seen him do. But it was interesting seeing him do work where he's back to doing line work, and I can't remember if he was coloring it himself or whether he was working with a colorist. It makes sense he would color it himself since he's a painter, but it's weird because it looks like Alex Ross, but you realize how much of what we think of as Alex Ross is in the drawing, not in the painting. Like when you look at it, it looks like stripped down Alex Ross. Like if you took an Alex Ross painting and you cranked the contrast on it so that it really was just like, so it really was like line art and color holds. But when you look at it, it is still kind of in that what I was saying. It's like no matter who your influence is, you as an artist is still going to show through. It still looks like Alex Ross, and I was like just blown away by that. But I'll tell you one of the books that I read of his that I bought it specifically. It was a great story, and I like Jim Kruger, the writer. But also, I was very, very curious to see how how Alex Ross's process works in terms of collaborating with another artist. There was a book called Justice, not to be confused with Injustice, the comic based on the video game. But it was a book called Justice, written by Jim Kruger, and it was a collaboration between Alex Ross and I want to say Doug Braithwaite was the penciler / layout artist. I think he gave Alex Ross pretty tight pencils to work from, but with enough freedom for Alex Ross to come in and change things up stylistically. And the interesting idea was just the fact that you would take somebody. Sorry, you need to get a little more. I need to get a little more comfortable here. Alex Ross doing his painted style on top of another artist's storytelling so that he didn't have to worry about working out the draftsmanship and the visual storytelling. All he had to do was come in, excuse me, in the same way that in the 40s, 50s, 60s, in the early Marvel days, where they would have layout artists and finishers. Basically, Alex Ross. It sounds like if you're an Alex Ross fan, you're probably familiar with this project already. So this is almost more for the benefit of everyone else listening. That it was almost as if Alex Ross was coming in and he was being a finisher for another artist, but those finishes were painted. And it looked like Alex Ross, but it had a different feel and flavor to it in that, some of the draftsmanship choices and the panel compositions, they were great choices. I don't think Alex Ross would have worked with a project if he wasn't working with an artist that he didn't feel comfortable experimenting with. I think the closest I can think of is how when you take a penciler and an inker and they fuse into something different than what either one of them would have done. Now, mind you, I haven't gone back, and honestly, just talking about this makes me realize I've never bothered to look at what Doug Braithwaite's pencils look like by himself, like his own non-Alex Ross comic work. I've only really looked at that Justice comic, but I realized I should look and see what his work looks like. But it really felt to me like there was something unique in fusing Alex Ross with another artist. And from what I remember, he still prefers, doing his own work that's fully painted, but he had only positive things to say about the collaboration, in terms of it allowing him to get more work done faster. And he was, I think relatively pleased with the results. I think the only reason why he wouldn't keep doing it is because he does enjoy doing the whole thing himself, which is why I guess with Full Circle, he ended up, doing a different experiment in order to do faster work. Now, instead of like turning parts of the creative process over to other artists, he's like, I'm going to go back to my roots, which, to this day, I still have never read Terminator Burning Earth, which was an old, I don't think it was Alex Ross's first comic book, but it was one of his early works in comics. And I think that it was pencils and inks that were in a style similar or process similar to what he did with Full Circle. I guess I say all of this. and by the way, I saw Red also mentioned, check out Tracy J. Butler. She's really good with art, but also so detailed and realistic. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look her up later, check out her work. And, that's the thing. I'm fascinated by all kinds of different artist styles. Like I like artists that are cartoony. I like guys that do distorted stuff like Jim Mahfood or Eddie Campbell. Well, Eddie Campbell isn't distorted. His stuff is more scratchy. I guess I was thinking of, let me see. It's weird to compare the two because they're still pretty different artists, but Jim Mahfood or Dave McKean, where they're definitely cartooning in a surrealistic way. But also guys like Kyle Baker, who are full-on cartoonists. Yet I also love stuff like Alex Ross. Painters are also more expressionistic. Like Ashley Wood is probably my number one favorite. He combines all of those things, like cartoony, expressionistic, but also painterly and experimental. Like for the longest time, and he still is a huge influence on me, my favorite artist generally has always been Bill Sienkiewicz because I like all these different art styles. And the thing that I saw when I discovered Bill Sienkiewicz's work in high school was just, oh, you don't have to choose. You can just combine all these things in a single comic. Hell, you can combine them all in a single page if you want. All these different styles and media. And he's always been sort of, I got to move this down further now because now this is down here. This just keeps getting lower and lower. In fact, what I should have done when I loosened this was really drop this down significantly and then raise it up with this other. Let's see here. Get this down all the way down to the bottom of the page. This way I've got a little bit more control. Oh, but now my big melon is in the way. Here, I'm going to have to. We'll figure it out. We will figure it out. What was I saying? I never wanted to ape another artist's style, but I wanted so much to be able to do what Bill Sienkiewicz did. And it's not that I want to ape Ashley Wood so much as it is, in my mind, I had an idea of what I wanted my art to be. Like, I couldn't do it yet, but I had a picture in my head, and I discovered Ashley Wood's work, and I was like, crap, he's doing what I want to do. Like, it's not even, I like his style. What he's doing is what I had in my head, but wasn't able to get on the page. And that was, it gave me, I've always had it's not a love-hate relationship with his work. It's love frustration with his work because, again, I don't want to ape another artist's style, but I looked at his work and I was like, that's it. He's doing the thing that I'm trying to do. So hence me figure drawing, because at a certain point I realized, well, all of the artists that I love tend to do a lot of expressionistic. Like I mentioned, along with Bill Sienkiewicz, I had mentioned Dave McKean. The guy who, for those who don't know Dave McKean, his drawing stuff is very loose and expressionistic and cartoony in kind of the same vein as Kent Williams. His paintings are mixed media, and the thing I think he's mostly known for are the covers for the original run of Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics. But he's done a ton of amazing comics on his own. He also painted Batman Arkham Asylum with Grant Morrison. But what I kind of came to was the idea that the reason why all these artists who I love can do all of these expressionistic experimental things is because they have a fundamental, strong understanding of basic volume and form such that they can manipulate it. They can make something that should not feel real. So it's not a matter of cartooning and doing things that are unrealistic. It's a matter of being able to make the unbelievable believable. And that has led me basically into the journey of trying to improve basic draftsmanship that I've been on for years now and still continue to be on. Let's see here. Red had mentioned in terms of Tracy Butler. She's my number 2 favorite comic book artist. Let's see here. And Red said, yeah, it's okay. I really don't mind in terms of me rambling and going off on the extra description for others. And yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. James mentioned Chris Ware as an example of a cartoonist. And what's crazy is I'm trying to think. There's only one book by Chris Ware that I have read. And actually, you know what? I keep getting confused. It's something called Building Stories. And I'm trying to remember whether it's Chris Ware or whether it is the guy who does 8-Ball. Point being is that they're both cartoonists whose work I have not dug deeply into, but whose name and body of work I respect. Chris Ware is definitely one that I want to spend some more time reading and looking at. I mean, there's so many great artists out there. When people talk about comics suck now and there's never anything good to read, I'm like, I just want to slap people. There's so much good comics. I don't have enough time. If I just stopped sleeping and read comics, I wouldn't have time to read all the great comics there are that are out right now. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I want to read that's been published over the past decade or two. So you might say, see, that's old stuff. But I'm like, there's always new stuff coming out. And the stuff that it doesn't seem like it's new to me because I've been reading comics since, if I want to date myself seriously, I've been reading comics since 1990. So I started reading comics right around the time the Image founders started their runs at Marvel. So, they had already broken into the industry, done work at other, maybe some work at DC, some work at some other publishers. But for me, like, I was really started reading right around the time, like, I think Todd McFarlane had just wrapped up his Hulk run. And it was right before he had started his, or he had wrapped up his Spider-Man run. And it was right before he had started the just regular Spider-Man book. I think one of my first issues of New Mutants was the first Rob Liefeld issue. So I read through all of his New Mutants and X Factor stuff. Not X Factor, X Force. My first Jim Lee comic was actually not his X-Men stuff, but his Punisher War Journal work. So I started reading that stuff early on. In fact, Silvestri's first work, Mark Silvestri's first work that I read was when he was working on X-Men. So, yeah, I've been reading stuff for such a long time that things that came out in the like stuff that came out around 2010, which, at this point, almost 15 years ago, to me, that's just stuff that I've missed and haven't had time to catch up on. It doesn't seem like ancient history to me. So let's see here. Red mentions, I really want my style to look playful, like Bruce Timm or Akira Toriyama or Tracy Butler. And rest in peace, Toriyama. Yes, it's very sad we lost that great creator earlier in the year. And it's actually interesting that you have these not conflicting, but these contrasting influences, because I'm kind of the same way. There are artists I like who are realistic. There's artists I like who are expressionistic. There's artists I like who are highly stylized. I think Brian Stelfreeze is an amazing artist, and he is stylized and he can do cartoony, but it's more of the fact that he does a heightened reality, because it's not photorealistic, but he does great portraits that are, that have a realistic feel to it. Well, they have very much a sense of the actual person as opposed to being a caricature of a person. If that makes any sense. But I think that the idea, I don't know how much you sit down and intentionally do experiments, Red, with your work, but it might be an interesting idea to sit down and take a character. Maybe it's one of your own original characters, or maybe it's just maybe it's just Batman or whatever. But to take a character, to sit down and do 4 renderings, to render that character trying to imitate Bruce Timm, then render that character trying to imitate Toriyama, then draw that character trying to imitate Tracy Butler, and then do a final rendering where you try to take a little bit of all 3 and do them together, just to see what it would look like if you were to mash it up. Like if you were to do a character, let's say that you were to break a character into 3 phases. Hang on, I've got to drop down here. So let's say phase 1 is the gesture. Phase 2 is the style. And then stage 3, now this is going to get a little bit confusing because style rendering usually is a part of style, but the way I'm going to talk about this, I'm separating style from rendering, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So let's say that you started with a character and you tried to do a gesture that was very much like just the pose, the angle, the movement of the character very much felt like a Bruce Timm drawing. And then when you go to actually to define the characters, the characteristics of the character, the costume, the features, the anatomy, if you were to render it in Toriyama's style, so it's more solid, but I feel like Toriyama is cartoony, but not everything, even though it's rounded, is not necessarily as rounded as Bruce Timm. So imagine if Toriyama were to ink a Bruce Timm drawing. So that's what I'm saying for style. And then to go over and color it or add tone or shading like Tracy Butler with her photorealistic style. So you could literally take 3 different artists, take their style and merge them. And you could also mix and match. So you could try and do a gesture based on a Tracy Butler gesture and then draw it as if that gestural drawing was inked by Bruce Timm and then render it with kind of a simple flat color like Toriyama. So more of a, Dragon Ball Z kind of an animated cell shaded look. See here. Red says, I experiment every day with different, I think, art styles. And he said, thanks for giving me ideas. You know what? That actually sounds like that would be a good experiment. I'm going to try to remember this for myself, and I'm going to try and come up with 3 very different artists whose work I admire and try to do this. Maybe I'll do this on a live stream. It might be like a multi-part thing because this actually sounds like it's hard enough of a challenge. I don't think I could finish it in 1 hour. But I think it's an interesting thing for kind of all of us to talk about. And I see James had mentioned, James says, I don't think all comics suck now, but I have noticed a dip in quality. While I don't mind seeing IDW do licensed stuff, I'd like to see some original IPs from them. I agree. I think that the challenge for a lot of these publishers, I mean, I work, my day job is in the toy industry, and I've found that much like comic book companies, with toy companies, a lot of times it's the licensed properties that keep the lights on and pay the bills. Like I think all toy companies want to create their own G.I. Joe or their own Hasbro. They want to have sort of a marquee intellectual property that they can develop and control and have people, paying the license from them. But in the long run, it's like, I don't know if you've heard that idea in entertainment that with movie studios, they will do one movie that is successful that pays. Like the reason why blockbusters keep happening, I'm not anti-blockbuster, I'm not pro-blockbuster. I think that there should be movies of all types of budgets and ranges, and I don't think that I love superheroes. I don't think that every single movie should be a superhero movie. But blockbusters, the reason why they've become so prominent and kind of taking over Hollywood is that you get one blockbuster. If you can get 1 or 2 blockbusters a year, that may pay for the slate of maybe 1 or 2 adult dramas or adult comedies, then a bunch of action movies. So it may end up that movie will pay for all of the other movies that are a small profit, break even, and then usually like half of the movies actually, don't even make their budget back. And that is very true, I think, in almost every entertainment industry. Excuse me. I think it would be curious to hear if it's like that in video games. I don't know enough about the video game industry to know what the success to failure ratio is. It feels like the lead time for video games is so long in terms of developing them that they would kind of have to have a good sense on the marketing side of whether a game is going to do well before they release it. But still, most of the time when I think about video games, it seems like it's so much more like the movie industry that who knows, it may be something where they spend years and millions of dollars developing and promoting something, and then it just doesn't stick the landing. But on that note, we're past an hour here. So as I have mentioned before, get that. And let's come back. Switch to this. So if you would like to participate in the art book study group, artist office hours, I can turn this off now. We're going to be doing those tomorrow night. So it'll be Monday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're not already a patron, you can go over to Patreon. Let me where's the banner? Where are my banners? Patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. And in fact, Patreon has free trials available now. So you don't have to necessarily commit to being a patron. You can just sign up for the free trial. Join us for an art book study group live. See if you like it. There's an archive so you can watch all the replays of art book study group, which, I'm slowly rebranding it to artist office hours. Either way, it means watching me study from art books while you bring your own art questions to talk about, to ask and discuss. And we can do that on the voice channel. There's a Discord server where we share feedback, tips, process, art talk, and more. You get all of that for as little as $2 a month if you head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. In addition, there's an online digital archive where you can read my comic books. And I hope to see you guys there. There's higher tiers for higher rewards, but $2 a month gets you in. So, and if you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated gifts delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which inspire me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my books, you can pick up Eye of the Gods. It is my first graphic novel that I wrote and drew and published about a man who's cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is a retelling of Lucifer's Fall from Heaven as a Western. So it's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter. Got character designs, thumbnails, photo reference. I basically show you how I put the entire comic book together. All that. And if you'd like to see book flip throughs, go to the homepage of my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Jeremy. And if you scroll down to book flip throughs, there are flip throughs of all of these. I just got the camera above the book so you can see what's inside before picking it up. So on that note, again, guys, I always appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with me. It's good to be back, to be streaming on a regular basis. And I'm glad to see all you guys. Last couple of comments there. See here, Red said the video game industry is a different breed of things. Said if you F up the game mechanics or something, people will crucify you. You know what? I miss gaming. I used to game a lot when I was in high school and college. And then eventually I realized if I don't stop playing games, I'm never going to finish making any comics or write or draw anything. So I watched kind of the gaming industry from afar, and the artwork amazes me and the gameplay amazes me, but I hardly play any games. I haven't played any games regularly in ages. If I had all the time in the world and I was making comics like full time during the day, then yeah, I'd probably start gaming again. Maybe find a game that has some cool dragons or something that my wife would like, a game that we can kind of co-op play together or something like that. That'd be some nice family time. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Red, Suretsy in the chat. Good to see you again. Everybody else, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. That's it for now. Go be creative.